Immorality, anti-Semitism, and replacement theology are eroding the foundations of biblical Christianity. Hoyavel presents the Heartland Connection, where Christians are equipped to walk out the truth in God's Word and to support the land and people of Israel.
Shalom and welcome to the Heartland Connection. We are studying God's holy word right here in the heartland of Israel, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today and to have Rabbi Yonadav, who's also here. Thank you, Rabbi Yonadav.
Shalom, Zach.
It's great to have you. I really appreciate you taking your time to study the Word of God with us every week. It's such an amazing thing to study here in the land of Israel and with a Jewish man who's a rabbi who's been studying this and knows so knowledgeable about it all. And to be able to bring this to you guys all over the world is such an exciting thing. So thank you for joining us today. This week's Torah portion is Metzora, which is usually translated as leper, or as we've learned about last week, it's basically somebody who has tzara'at, which is the Hebrew word that's usually translated as leper, but it's not what we think of leprosy today. So a leper that we're reading about here is not what we think of as somebody who has leprosy. It's a little bit different kind of disease, and we're going to study a little bit more about that as we dig into it here. But that's the title of this week's portion, which this year we have Tazria and Metzora together, but some years they'll be separated, so we're doing them as two different portions here. So just in case there's any confusion about that. All right, so we're going to jump in. We're in Leviticus chapter 14. And in the previous portion, we read about what what leprosy or this tzara'at is, and now we're going to read about the purification process and what happens to this person who has this disease. And right here, right off the bat, it tells us some of the things. It says in verse 4 that the Kohen, the priest, is supposed to go and he's supposed to take 2 live birds, cedar wood, crimson thread, and hyssop. So my first question is, Rabbi Yonadav, what's the significance of these items? Why are those things brought into this purification process? We don't really hear much about these things before, and all of a sudden here they are in the purification of tzara'at, of this leprosy thing. What is the significance of these items?
Okay, we can try to find significances to this list, and we are trying to find significances. Mm-hmm. And we can suggest significance, but we can't say that's the significance in all of it. Mm-hmm. And everyone can read it and compare it to different places in the Bible that we can find this list and try to understand what bring them all together to the purification of the Metzora. But let's try to say something. We talked about the evil speak. Mm-hmm. And once you said something bad on your friend, neighbor, it's like free bird. You said it and now go find it. You can't.
Right.
And it's not only one bird. It's like a lot of birds that spread to everywhere, and now you have to go and to tell everyone, oh, what I said, it's a lie. Don't believe me. Mm-hmm. He's a good man. I lied about him, or it was too much what I said, or something. Mm-hmm. So you in the purification you have to free one bird. It's go, and now try to find it, and the cedar wood and the last hyssop, right?
Hyssop.
Mm-hmm. It's like the higher one and the lower one.
Interesting.
It's to tell the Metzora, you have no you are not you are too proud of yourself, like cedar wood. You have to be like hyssop.
Interesting.
If you were a nav, not proud,
Humble.
humble, you don't talk like that on your neighbor, on your friend. You have too humble, not such proud. And the you call it
The thread.
yes, the thread. It's even tiny, the most tiny creature.
Uh-huh.
It's like little point on the tree of a alone. It's there is alone.
An oak.
Oak. It's such tree. Very little point. This is the thread. So it's like to show you the gap between your pride and your value.
Wow. That's really good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And the story about the bird, it reminds me of the classic story about the man who went and said a lie or something, and he made evil speech. And then he came to the rabbi, whoever, and said, "Rabbi, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. What should I do? I just said something really bad." And so the rabbi took a feather pillow and opened it up in the window, and whoosh, and the feathers just went everywhere. And he said, "Now I want you to go gather up all the feathers." And he said,
Yes.
you can't find all the feathers. And he said, "Well, that's exactly the way it is, because when you say something wrong, then it gets passed on and passed on and passed on, and it's so there's no way you can go and find it all." So it reminded me of that story. And you said that, and I think that's a big part of what we're learning here is, and what I'm learning through this is, evil speech and how we relate to one another is so important, because it goes so far when we do good things or when we do bad things. And it seems like that's why God's making such a big deal about it here. And there's so many verses on this, is because treating our neighbors right is a really big deal. Speaking, honoring and being humble and these things is such a amazing thing. And we know from the Torah too that Moshe was one of the most humble men. So here he is giving us these instructions about how we should live, and such a good reminder for us. And there's so much to learn from this. So that's really good explanation on those different pieces.
We have in the laws of the evil speech, we have law that even to say something right, but is bad on someone else, we should not. It's forbidden. And it's not because we have to try to say everything is good and there are no failures in the world. No, there are. But when you say something bad on someone else, the one who
hears it,
hear it, can't know exactly the situation of the incident.
Right.
Sometimes, right, he failed. He did something bad. But do you know all the problems he had and the tense and okay, he failed. But when you tell it to someone, you have to show all the situation, all the background. So even if it's right, you should not tell it.
Wow. If we could all follow that rule, how much better would the world be? Even if because that's what we say, right? So if somebody says, if you say something bad, they say, "Are you sure about that? That he actually did that?" And say, "I'm sure, like it for sure was that." And a lot of times we have no idea, what really happened in the situation, or what they were going through, or those type of things. So, I think it seems like we can convince ourselves that, I know for sure that's what he did. It's right, so I should be able to say if it's what he did. Like you said, we convince ourselves that, I can't ignore the bad thing that happened. Everybody needs to know about it. But yeah, it's not not helpful, because it damages the person's reputation too, right? If you damage their reputation, then people look at them differently. And for some reason, it seems like it's kind of a human tendency to look and remember the bad things rather than the good things. And even for ourselves, we remember the bad things about ourselves rather than the good things, and we can get ourselves in depression or those kind of things. And so that's why this is so serious. Are there any other laws of evil speech that you could share?
Maybe the most important law is not about the speech, but about the thought. That if you see someone do something and he is a good man, you have to advocate his deeds, to try to teach right on his deeds, to interpret his deeds for good.
Okay. So if you see somebody doing something and you're not sure, it could be bad, but you have to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, well, he
That's
probably
right.
did it for the good reason and not for the bad reason.
And even if he's righteous, even if it's just 1% for good, so you have to
Believe
to
that.
think, to believe that. Of course, if he's wicked one. So don't be silly and don't fall in his traps.
Right.
After you interpret the reality in this way, it's very easy not to speak evil on your friend.
Because if you give them the benefit of the doubt and it's what you're thinking, then it's also what you're going to talk about. And if you instill that value in your heart for that person, that he's a good person and that he probably did it for the right thing, then you don't want to say something bad about him, because then it might make the person think evil, and that's the whole point. It seems like. So yeah, so powerful. Our words are, what is the Proverbs say, the power of life and death is in the tongue, right?
That's right.
So it's a very, very powerful thing. And I think sometimes we don't realize, we have these sayings in English like, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And that's not biblical at all. That's not true. But sometimes we try to convince ourselves that it is. That's never going to hurt me, or it doesn't. It's not that big a deal. But it is biblically a really, really important and biblical thing.
You remind me something. We now today, this is the day of the
The Memorial Day.
Memorial Day of the soldiers. So there is such proverb about when someone is fight and get injured. So he says the pain of the injure is go, but the pride of being soldier and doing the right right thing, it's remain.
Wow. Yeah, very, very powerful. Very good. Anything else on evil speech before we go on? Anything else? One more question on that. Because I know sometimes it's hard too if you're trying to have good thoughts and to speak, but then if somebody else that you're with is saying something evil, and you're trying to figure out what to do, like they're speaking evil, but you don't want to think those thoughts. So what do you do in that situation?
Okay. First, like we said, the most important is your thoughts. If you want to believe in good and to interpret the reality for good, this is the most important thing. The second is, if you can stop him to tell him, I don't want to hear it. This is the best. If you can't, you can go. So, okay, I don't want to hear, and you exit the room.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah, and how do you do that without embarrassing him?
Look, if you can do it gentle, to say, look, I'm very, I try hard to keep the laws and not to hear bad things. I'm sure you have good reason to tell it,
Right.
and you're right, and whatever you want. But for me, it's not good to hear it, so excuse me. But and of course, you can also just try to
Steer the conversation.
right without say something.
Yeah, that's probably best, right?
Yes. On the other hand, if it's someone you care about him and you want to help him, so you have to find the time to tell him, look, it's destroy your life.
Yeah.
Try to not to talk bad things.
That's good. That's very, yeah.
Of course, if you have to say something bad about someone, there are rules how to say it. Because someone wants to cooperate with someone else, and this someone else is liar, and he will steal all his money. You have to tell him.
Right.
You can't say, oh, I should not tell something bad. You have to tell him, and he should not believe. Just to take it in mind, to check it. Not to believe because you said.
But just to be careful,
To be careful.
watchful.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Again, I'm just thinking, wow, if we could all really take that on and follow those principles, it would be, we'd have so much more unity and love and things between people. It would be so much better if we could really take this seriously and follow this out.
Sometimes the fight between people can solve in the beginning. And you need good eye for that. And to be careful not to talk bad things. And you can make peace between them, and it will be okay. And if they have not someone who will help them to make peace, it can become great fight between families and between neighbors. And it's very important to, like you said, to want to see the good in the reality and to try to solve problems, to understand that there are different views. And if you can look on the reality in the eyes of your friend, you can see that you can accept his view. He's not bad one.
Yeah. Wow. So good. Really good stuff. Okay. So my next question here is in the Torah portion, a little bit further on. Here we are in chapter 14, verse 33. Then it talks about this leprosy or tzara'at being in the house, and that it could actually get within the walls and inside the house. And then we talked about before, we don't know exactly what this disease is or how this works, but what can we learn, or what's significant about this being in the house and then how it's taken care of? Can you share with us a little bit about the tzara'at in the house?
Okay, first of all, it's something very unique to the Holy Land. There is no leprosy on houses in other places.
Interesting.
Because here it's like we have to discover, to show, to reveal the holiness in the physical land. And when there are spiritual powers, there are also disease. of spiritual disease. So, and like you say, like we said on last portion about the clothes, the house is also like a wider skin of the soul of the owner. So if this owner is let's say sinner in the laws between people, and his relationships are bad, so God bring leprosy on his house, and he has to learn, and he has to find another place to live in, because his house is his home is sick, and also the impurity begins just after the priest come and recognize the disease, the leprosy. Before the priest came and recognized it, there is no impurity. So after he called the priest tell him, okay, before I'm coming, take out all your things so they will not be impure. And there is such midrash that when his neighbor came and asked him to give him something, I need a tool, a hammer or something, he said, I have nothing, because he don't want to give. So now he has leprosy on his house, and he has to exit all his tools and all.
To lay it all out in the yard.
And they said, oh, you have I can see 5 hammers here. And he's embarrassed, and maybe it's good lesson to change his...
Wow. Is there any thought that maybe it would go in that progression, like first it would come in the house, and then on his clothes, and then on his skin, or something like that? Because it almost seems like maybe it could, if it's a spiritual thing, that God could be like, give him one chance if it's on the house, and then another chance if it's on his clothes, and then another chance. Is there any thought that it may have been like that, or do we not really know?
I don't remember, but it's possible.
Because it seems like if you have it on your skin and you have to go outside the camp, that's like really, really difficult. And having to bring all your stuff out of your house is difficult, but at least you don't have to, go outside the camp. Or if it's in your clothes, you can burn the clothes. Whatever, it's just maybe a warning before it gets worse, maybe. Could be an interesting thought. Yeah, and just the concept that the house could get sick is a very interesting thought that could even happen.
It's not exactly the house gets sick. It's the owner gets sick, and it's show on the house.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there a thought that this only would happen when the temple was?
Yes.
Because it seems like if it's a spiritual sickness.
Yes, it's like when you have a clean sheet, you can see each point of dirt. But if your sheet is dirty, you can't see every point of.
Right.
It's all it. So when we have no temple, it's like it's all unclean.
And it would also be impossible to become pure without the temple.
Right. And we can't recognize it. We don't know. We can't recognize the leprosy.
Wow, really interesting stuff. All right, so then the last part of the portion, it's always interesting reading through these different portions, because sometimes, if I'm reading with my children, then kind of read through certain sections kind of faster, or don't want to get into. There's some almost kind of more personal details here, but it is in the Torah, and obviously something that we need to study. But as I'm reading through and I see these different details, I think, why did God feel like why did he bring down these details into this very, very, like detailed things and kind of private areas? Why couldn't he just keep it, more what you do to your neighbor? But this is like what's in your home, in your bedroom, and very, very private areas. Why did God choose to give commandments and talk about these things that are very private?
Okay, this is our life, and we live it day after day, and God wants us to improve our life. We don't want God will ignore our little problems and like say, oh, it's your problem, do whatever you want. And especially that we talk about the most powerful skills of the man, the ability to bring life to the world, to be a participant with God in creation of life.
Wow.
So this subject has to be done very precise, very pure, in the right thoughts. And when we lose powers of life, if the man or the woman, if it's the seed that can bring life or the blood that can keep the life in the womb until the giving birth, when these powers are losing, it's impure. We have to contact the purity, the powers of life, and not to spend them. Of course, we can learn from these details to another subjects in our life that we should not spend powers of life. And maybe the most frequent thing that is power of life is our time. Sometimes we lose our time, and we have to try to use it very well, because each second it's second of life, and if we spend it, it's like to kill the second. And it's like impurity to lose the life.
Wow, that's really, really powerful thought. And I know for me, it's always a struggle trying to figure out, okay, how do I prioritize correctly? What things should I be spending time on? And then, you might think, well, then I just need to spend all my time studying the Bible. But then if you do that, then you can't go out and spend time with your family so like trying to prioritize, okay, what are all the important things and how do I figure out is a real challenge. I know, especially for me with, my 7 children now and trying to figure out, how to spend time with each one or to do stuff together. It can be definitely a challenge with time and trying to figure out how to do it. And, I want to teach him how to play an instrument, and I want to teach him the Torah, and I want to teach him, all these different things. And I want to learn more things. And so it can be certainly a challenge to prioritize.
And sometimes also vacation, it's not spending time.
It's very, very important. Yeah. So, may God give us wisdom to know what should be the priority and what shouldn't. And we can learn a lot of that from the Torah, right? When we study it, we can learn what things are important, what things are not important, those type of things. So it's very powerful. All right, I think we have run out of time, but it's been really great. I've really enjoyed today's study. Thank you, Rabbi Yonadav, for taking your time to share with us today. And thank all of you guys for listening. This has been a really, really great time. And you guys have learned something from today's study, I'd encourage you to share this with your friends and family. We really want to get the word out and let other people know about these nuggets that we're learning from the scriptures. And if you guys have any feedback, you can send me an email, zach@hayovel.com. Would love to hear from you guys. But until next week, thank you guys for joining us, and may God bless you. And Shabbat Shalom from the beautiful, exceedingly good land of Israel.